I'll call the meeting of our Planning Commission to order this evening. First order of business tonight is election of a vice chair. I would entertain a motion for the vice chair position. Alderperson Engelberger.
Motion to, I'll nominate Scott.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? According to Robert's rules, I just need to ask 3 times, although it sounds kind of rude and someone's nominated. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, all those in favor of Alderperson Truill as vice chair?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no? That motion carries. Welcome back, Vice Chair Truill.
Sounds like as if you want to do the show.
And then we'll take a moment to welcome Commissioner Barman.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Todd.
Appreciate it.
As a quick update, or a short, brief update, Attorney Dregney is reviewing the council action at the reorganizational meeting regarding appointing versus confirmation, and he'll let us know more about that in the next couple of weeks. He's not sure how all that will shake out. So, quick update. Welcome for tonight, though.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next item on our agenda is considering approval of the Planning Commission meeting minutes of April 10th, 2017.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion by Truill, second by Hannah. Comments or discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Council Representative Report. Alderperson Truill. Good thing you got reelected.
Thank you, Your Honor. Really, in terms of the actions that we had, I think the only one that we took that really went to council was all the CSM that was approved. Otherwise, we've had some extraterritorial approvals that have passed as it's gone to council. So I don't think there were really the month of April was a whole series of organizational related meetings at council level. So
All right. Thank
I don't
you.
think there's anything else.
Great. Alderperson Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to also welcome
Thank you.
Alder Bartlett as a new member of the commission also.
Thank you, Michael. I'm sorry, Matt. I used to see you at all the meetings, so
Yeah, thanks.
welcome. Status of our developments, Planning Director Shield.
Contained in your packet is a summary. The one I think that I'd like to highlight is we've had 11 new single-family starts this year, which already exceeds the total number we had for last year. So through April, we've had 11. If there's any questions, I'll certainly try to answer them, but the report's in the packet.
Right. Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is a request by Craig Whitehead, Crown Group, for a conditional use permit to allow an outdoor display use, including site plan approval for Tractor Supply, Inc. at 1800 U.S. Highway 51 and 138, as we recall, the former Walmart site. We'll begin with a explanation, or an overview, I should say, by Planning Director Shield.
Applicants are here to speak to it, but certainly just a quick overview. The Tractor Supply organization is looking to locate in the principal area of the vacated Walmart portion of the building that used to house Walmart as well as Pick and Save. The above diagram just gives you a locational overview of the portion of the building that's planned to be utilized for the Tractor Supply operation. For those of you in the audience, the larger remaining Pick and Save location still will remain. The Tractor Supply is proposed to take up approximately a little over 20,000 square feet of the remaining space that was previously housed by Walmart, and then there's a vacant tenant space that would be available in this location. You'll recognize, and we can talk it through, but this is the outdoor display area for some of their product, as well as some of the area along here for that as well. The future outlot area isn't part of tonight's principal discussion, but they are exploring potential other uses for this area in the front portion of the parcel as well. So the parking that's being discussed as part of this project really encompasses the remaining area, not of which would be encompassed in the outlot area.
Thank you. We'll move into a public hearing.
Just a real quick clarification.
Sure.
Rodney, when you indicated that they are considering something with the outlot, is Tractor TSC or the owners of the overall development are looking at doing something in that outlot?
The owners of the overall campus.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to close the meeting and open a public hearing. I don't have anyone registered to speak. Is there anyone, I'll look into the room, or wishing to speak at the public hearing regarding Tractor Supply this evening? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and reopen for the regular course of business and discussion from our plan commissioners.
Did you gentlemen want to give us an overview from your perspective?
I'm Craig Whitehead of the Crown Group, Hoffman Estates, Illinois. My partner, Mark Lambert. We bought this shopping center, I think 3 or 4 years ago, knowing very well that Walmart would be trying to get a Super Walmart approved. I think they had been in your community for a number of years, and we kind of expected that would go through, and it did. And so we expected to have them move out, and they have. They're still on a lease for another year, but we're trying to get rid of that lease and accommodate Tractor Supply. We're negotiating a lease with Tractor Supply that should be signed probably in the next week or so. And we're looking for other tenants to take the remainder of the space. And there was a tenant that had an interest, but they seem to have gone by the wayside. So it may end up being one tenant. Maybe it ends up being a couple of tenants. Pick and Save has done some remodeling in the last couple of years, and their lease is coming due. It looks like they'll stay. And potentially the outpad could be used for something for Pick and Save, or it could be a smaller building put in that area. And we're going to knock down the existing entryway for the Walmart store and create a new entry for the Tractor Supply. And my architect's running late, so he's here now, so he can answer questions as well. And then we'll put in a new entryway or two, depending on what happens with the vacant space. So I think that brings you up to speed. We're gonna take out the trees along 51, and we're gonna put in new landscaping we've proposed. We just think what's there is tired and old, and something new and shiny and nice would be better. I think that's everything.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments from our commissioners? Or would we like to hear from the architect, maybe?
Yeah, does the architect have any comments about how the design was put together?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Jeff Stowe. I'm working with Crown Development on this. What you're looking at there is an out-of-date elevation. I think there's a more current one in the packet for the Tractor Supply. Right there. If you'll see on the top elevation, it's a composition with the Pick and Save there to the east, and then the vacant Walmart. And what's shown there to the left of the Pick and Save is that's what we're not going for approval on that right now, but we're going for approval to the far tenant to the west there, the Tractor Supply, essentially keeping the same earth tone colors, but repainting the building, and then putting in a new entrance feature for the Tractor Supply store, a little bit in their theme with, they like to have a, more of a rustic or a barn look, so we've incorporated some corrugated galvanized metal facade there and anchoring it with some pilasters and just popping that out about a foot from the existing plane of the wall there and punching in some new glazing.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Hanna.
Thanks, Mayor. Quick question. So you guys are going to take down the old Walmart entry, and just for reference, that is in between these two designated entries currently?
Yes.
And you're not going for approval for the one in the middle. In the meantime, how is that going to be finished?
Right now, we are going to keep an opening, tear down the existing Walmart, and then basically right where that grid line is, or between the two tenants, is on the left-hand side there's existing slider doors, and on the right hand there's existing slider doors. In the meantime, we would close up the ones on the Tractor Supply side of things, and then just keep the slider door entry and a brick facade basically there until we have a tenant to go in and we can give them an entrance that they want that fits their needs.
This area, is this the area you're talking about right here?
Yes, yes. So just on the plan there, eventually we, put in a planter there and the bike racks on either side of it. Essentially, the entrance there would be right where that, the blue area starts, and those two bike racks currently are shown would be where the temporary glazing would be, just to have access to that space so we could show it to potential tenants and so forth.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanna?
Many thanks. Appreciate the colored elevations. Regarding the other, I guess, two sides of the building, will the paint and all that facade be carried through to the west side and the north side?
Yes, around the Tractor Supply store, yes.
Commissioner Bartlett?
I had a question earlier I sent through Michael Stacy about the sound and the outdoor speakers. Where are those located, and how do you keep those down so they don't interfere with the neighbors to the northwest?
So Michael asked that question this morning, and so we got back to Tractor and asked them. They said they have one on the outside, which would be on the west wall, and they would have one on the south wall. And obviously the one on the west wall, we don't want blaring to the homes to the northwest, so we'll commit that will point to the south. And they have a volume control on it, and we'll commit that we won't let them get carried away with volume issues. So if there is an issue, we will resolve that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments or questions?
Just a question. When we're looking at the required parking stalls, and I think in the write-up it was specified that 79 stalls would be needed when you're looking at the square footage of the Tractor Supply portion of the building. How does that work when you have a kind of a shared site? And I can't remember the exact wording that we use for the shared site when you have the vacant storefront that's going to be opened eventually. Because when I count just the 2 rows of parking and what's left, that's not going to be for display along the left side. I'm only getting 69 parking stalls, which means we're using some of the 2 rows of parking in front of the other portion of the building. So I didn't know how that worked with a shared storefront like this. If we just look at the whole lot together, or if they were kind of specifying Tractor Supply parking versus the other tenant.
Well, it's all a shared lot. It has been in 2 CSMs, and Walmart's been doing their thing all these years, and Pick and Save's been doing their thing all these years. If I'm remembering right, and I don't know that you have the parking counts. I don't know if we have those handy or not, but I'm pretty comfortable that the center has been parked at like 5 per 1,000 parking stalls, which probably these days, based on the majority of retail uses, is more than enough parking.
Right, but we're eventually eliminating a good deal of parking when you talk about the outlot area.
Yes, correct, I agree.
And when you're talking about now 2 tenants versus just 1.
Right.
Depending on the
I
tenant,
still
right?
think that we end up with over 4 per 1,000, which is pretty typical for parking standards these days, except for something like a super Walmart. But I think, and you guys know better than we, the many times I've been here, I've never seen any parking issues at all. And there's parking all around the Pick and Save on various sides. So I think we still are parked more than code.
Yeah, well, I think to answer your question, there's shared parking. So yes, it's not a line that says you have to park on this side.
Yeah, I think the parking will have to be reevaluated once we know what the next tenant will be.
Correct. Because one of the uses won't really require the majority of that area at all. So we're just waiting to see what evolves, and then we'll come back here.
Thank you. Commissioner Barman?
Second question is with respect to the planting that's along
Yes.
the main street that you're talking about, removing the trees.
Yep.
It looks to me like in your planting, it's all low-scape
Yes,
vegetation.
absolutely.
And that there's no
Nope.
overstory trees.
Nope.
And I was wondering how that relates to providing the street trees along the highway corridor there.
Michael, did
That's a separate issue. They'll have to talk to our Public Works Department.
So ultimately, there will need to be overstory trees within the stretch?
There may, depending on, what they work out with the Public Works Department.
And just so you know, we don't want to have those trees. We're spending probably 30 to 40,000 to put in all this new landscaping. So if you say to us that you got to do that and you got to put in some more trees, we're going to say, why don't we just leave what we've got, which we don't want to do. We think it's going to be nicer to have new and shiny. But we like to keep visibility open to our shopping centers as much as possible, and having trees block the view. I mean, you've already got a bank that blocks the view from the east side, so we wouldn't want to put trees there. We'd rather do it in this manner.
Thank you. Further comments regarding our conditional use permit before you this evening?
I'll give you a time frame. They want to be open, I think, by September, mid-September, so fairly fast if everything goes well.
That would be good. I know I'm hearing lots of buzz in the community already. That's good.
Two items, there's two resolutions, yeah.
Conditional use permit and then the site plan, right?
Correct, so two separate resolutions.
Commissioner Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. A couple questions about, for Rodney and Michael, about the fenced-in area on the side. No problems with that as far as setbacks or anything?
Correct.
And is that what kind of a fence is that? Is it see-through or?
Yeah, it's an 8-foot-high wrought iron.
Yeah, it's black, heavy-duty aluminum, 8-foot-high fence. I think there was a detail included with the packet.
That's accessible from the inside of the store or from the outside or both, or?
Primarily from the inside, but I did think they do have some exits that allow for exiting out from the garden center, or from that outdoor storage center.
And Rodney, as far as exceptions, I didn't see much listed here.
Nope. Here's the detail of the fencing.
There it is, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Truul.
And just as a follow-up question to Rodney or Michael, in terms of outdoor storage, is there anything, I read the report too. Do we have any other issues or any other concerns about any other ordinances that we deal with for kind of product storage like that?
The outdoor display is part of the conditional use, so that's what's really driving the conditional
Right.
use aspect of it.
But I guess,
The location and the positioning of it is consistent with ordinance requirements.
Thank you. Further comments or questions regarding the conditional use permit?
move
Not,
approval.
Commissioner Truul?
Move approval.
I'll second.
Motion by Truul, second by Hannah for approval
Of which one?
of the conditional use permit. This is the first resolution in your packet. We have yet to talk about the site plan.
So that would be the first one is a conditional use permit recommendation to council, that resolution, and the second one would be for the site plan.
Right, yep. So right now, we're just talking about the conditional use permit. Motion by Truul, second by Hannah. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. And next, we'll take up the site plan review and approval. We'll let Rodney start.
Yeah, I
Any
think
comments?
we've
Kinda
hit on a
covered it
lot
all.
of the items related to it, but certainly if there's more specific questions, we're open to answer them.
Talked a little bit about street trees and the new plantings. Commissioner Hannah.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I would say in regards to landscaping, I think it's fine. The trees that are there serve a good function of slowing people down as their way in. I'd ask maybe the applicants to maybe, I think your new plan would add a lot of color and interest in an entryway. If, and again, this is going to be working with the Public Works, but maybe not necessarily large shade trees, but something small, ornamental, to give it maybe just a little bit more height and scale. I guess I'm fine with the new plan. I think it's just more of a consideration, landscaping-wise. And if you do end up keeping the trees, I would say I'd be fine with that site plan as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. Couple questions. One with regard to what Matt just said. Are we putting the cart before the horse here? I mean, why isn't the Public Works involved ahead of time before the approval? I mean, are we approving this conditionally on that, or why isn't that done prior to coming here?
The communication just hasn't been made with Public Works yet.
And I'm not sure if it's even going to be required, but it's something that we have to work through.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we're talking about things that
Terrace trees.
we'd rather see, and, you know, well, this is going to be passed, and it's not even going to come back to us. It's going to be a done deal. So I don't follow why we do it this way. Why don't we
Well,
change and have everything done up front before approval?
yeah. If anything, it was maybe an oversight by ours. It's certainly a repurposing of an existing site. They presented a landscaping plan that certainly far exceeds what the point total on the site is required to have. It more than doubles the point total on their site. We didn't have the communication with the Public Works team yet, and that's an oversight on our part, if anything. But certainly this on-site landscaping plan, point-wise, far exceeds what the total points would be necessary.
And I understand that, and, you know, everything may go well, and even if there is a hitch, they still would have to comply with the ordinances and that kind of thing, but I just think that we should be getting the information first and then approving it, rather than approving it and then getting more information. One other question I had is just regarding the ownership. You guys are the owners of the building? The whole site, both lots?
Yes, 8-point-something acres,
Okay.
90,000 square feet.
And I guess I see on the public access, it shows one side going to Arkansas and one side going to Roundy's in Milwaukee as far as ownership. So it confuses me.
The tax bills have gone to the tenants. That was
Okay.
part of the lease,
Okay,
okay, but they were both leases.
okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Truill.
And my question was in terms of lighting. At this point, you're indicating that nothing is planned, but you indicate that staff report indicates that if anything does change, we'll have to come back with a report. Have you thought about making any other lighting changes, either to the immediate surface of the building or?
I don't think on the surface of the building for the Tractor Supply that I'm aware of. No, the Walmart recently updated.
If you could come to the podium, I'm sorry,
The
please.
parking lot.
Thank you.
Yep.
No, at this time, there's no building lighting or additional site lighting. Walmart recently upgraded the site lighting to LED fixtures, and it serves the site well. I mean, should the future tenant come in and want to do something, we're going to have to submit those elevations and that lighting package then at that time.
Right now, there's just pack-clad wall pack lights.
Right, there'll be an emergency down exterior light at that entrance for egress lighting, but otherwise the remainder of the site lighting remains.
And Walmart also had put in LED lighting in the parking lot, so you have all new,
Right.
highly efficient lighting in that parking lot, so we're in good shape there.
And then just a follow-up question on that is in terms of the signage on the building. So right now, Walmart has lighted letters or whatever. Is the new sign going to be lighted? I was confused because it says a face change is planned for the existing freestanding sign, which I understand. Is the light over the new entrance going to be lighted?
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
Yeah, it's a illuminated sign.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Commissioner Barman, did you have some questions? Questions?
Yeah,
Commissioner
sure.
Hanna.
Yeah, question of the applicant regarding the landscaping. I guess from a professional standpoint, it seems to be a little overplanted with the density of some of the perennials. And, you know, if everything fits, it definitely have a color pop. But maybe a consideration for us to consider for this is, and trying to work with you guys budget-wise, is cutting back on some of the numbers of perennials. I think you'd still be able to have the same amount of impact or the amount of shrubbery. And considering just, I'm not talking like a large maple or oak or anything like that, but something small, such as Ivy silk lilac tree, or off the top of my head, there's a list on the city website of considering maybe 2 to 3 trees within there on the terrace side. So not taking away from the perennial landscaping.
My landscape architect, I didn't bring him to the meeting, so he could probably better comment. Honestly, we really think we're doing something very nice here that we don't have to do. And everybody loves trees. I love trees. We all love trees. But I don't love them in front of my shopping centers. I don't like shopping centers are as we all know, retail is struggling. It's changing. We're trying to do everything we can for signage and visibility to attract customers to our shopping centers. We don't want them hidden. So we're trying to do this for our tenants, and our tenants want us to be doing these kind of things. So we thought, truthfully, that this was a very nice, expensive landscape plan, replacing some old, tired trees. And can we put in a flowering crab or something? We can talk to our architect and see what he says. So we'll try and do that. But we think this is going to be a lot better than what we see out there today.
Sure. Commissioner Barman.
Just to qualify, I think the issue for us, we certainly understand the desire to showcase the building and to really draw the eye to the front facade and to allow that clear sight line.
Yes.
But from a community perspective, one of the things that we look at is not just the sight lines to the building, but the streetscape as you're driving down both directions along the road, as well as the condition of the landscape for the people walking the sidewalk, because there's a big emphasis on enhancing the pedestrian environment as well. So what the short story, the lower story trees do is it allows for a little bit more of an impact for the driver, as you're traveling the corridor in addition to it. So that's just really why we're having the conversation.
Okay, thank you. Further comments or questions regarding the site plan?
Seeing none, move approval.
There's a motion by Truul for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bartlett. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will try and, we heard you.
Thank you.
We'll try and.
Agenda item 7 is a request by Bob Feller, Ionica, for a conditional use permit to allow an institutional residential use, including site plan approval for a senior assisted living apartment at 2600 Jackson Street, which is Kettle Park West, Lot 16. Planning Director Shield.
Just a quick summary. This is the parcel that would be adjacent to the planned hotel just west of that property. This lot is zoned institutional. It would be conditional in the district for the uses as outlined here. But that's the reason for the public hearing. There's a site plan approval or consideration as well as a conditional use application for us to consider. The applicants are here to give you an overview. I don't know if you want any of that before the public hearing or if you just want to move into the
Sure,
public
why don't we
hearing.
have the overview first, if you would, please?
Sure.
Commissioner
Just a quick
Hanna.
question. Rodney, if you just want to highlight what the exact conditional use is, since it is an institution, but why is it conditional?
I believe it's because, Michael, isn't it because it's the senior aspect of the assisted living is conditional?
Institutional residential.
Institutional residential is conditional in that district, so. Would you guys like to give us an overview?
Well, good evening. I'm Tom Pientka. I'm with Tuca Properties, representing the development company for Kettle Park Senior Housing. Tonight I'm joined with Bob Feller and Josh Stans from Iconica. They're the architects for the project and builder. And we're also joined by Kevin with JSD, who did the landscape design. Just a couple of quick minutes on the development. We're thrilled to be here. Stoughton does have a need for more senior housing, especially with the glut of baby boomers that are aging, like myself. But I've been working with Forward Development Group for about 1.5 years now to get our arms around this. And the good news is we're here. The bad news is it's taken a while to get here because we have many other senior housing developments going on in the state. So my partner in senior housing is Tealwood Senior Living out of Minnesota. They're the operator of the property. I pause on this for a moment because they're currently in 5 states. They own and operate about 50 facilities in those 5 states. And I'm pleased to say they are our partner of choice to work with us going down the road in future developments of our senior housing portfolio. So we're vertically aligned. We believe there should be good curb appeal. And I assure you, when you walk in the front doors, there's a wow factor to this. We want it to be home for our residents. We've worked really, really hard to create this Norwegian flair design that we think will really set the tone for other projects in the area as they develop. So I also am part owner in Iconica, so I'm very interested in design, and I wanted it to, it needs to sell. So hopefully you like it as much as I do. Without further ado, I'll let Josh come up and talk a little bit about the architecture and landscaping. Josh?
Ronnie, would you go to the elevation sheet, please?
I think I went the wrong way. Yeah. Which elevation do you want?
That's the one beforehand.
Okay.
It will be a little easier to start off with. Let's go one more. There we go. As Tom said, my name is Josh Stans. I'm an architect with Iconica. I'm here to kind of give you guys a quick overview of the exterior design, then answer any questions about this facility that we're doing. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a fantastic facility. Even as a young architect, I think there's a lot of really, really neat features and details with this facility. As you guys know, there's a strong influence of Scandinavian design in the Stoughton area. We really tried to hit on that, as well as bring in some influences of the rural farmhouse feel, and then also keep it contemporary as well. So through the use of large overhangs, some steeper roof pitches, the siding materials, both board and batten lap siding, and some cedar shakes, lots of face brick on the building, and the colors themselves kind of pull from those design influences. We paid attention to every detail, both inside and out, lots of glass, even down to the colors themselves. So the building consists of a 3-story assisted living facility, and then there's a 1-story on the next slide that's connected. That's a memory care. There's 21 units in the memory care. This will be the, I guess, baby sister to the bigger building. They both have the same design styles, just a little bit smaller. We're still doing a pitched roof here. They're going to be focused around a center courtyard that's going to have a very nice, intimate park-type feel for the residents. So 360 degrees around the building. We've paid attention to all those details. That's really all I have for design. Yeah, we can go through a couple of the images. So this is, as Tom said, we really wanted to have a lot of bang for your buck in the front. To be a lot of wow factor, and then there's going to be a lot of intimate spaces that are going to keep the residents feeling like they're in a homey area. So we've put these covered patios kind of around the whole building themselves that give the residents a spot to sit out, views to the park, views to the pond. We think they're nice areas. There's also two other renderings that kind of show a little more detail. I have those, Michael. They should be on the. It should be. You keep going.
I think so, go down.
Yep. So let's go to the last. Let's go to the one before this. There you go. So this will be a view from Jackson Street. Lots of landscaping. Here you can see a view of our covered porches, all the different roof pitches we have going on, the different sidings. Really, like Tom said, there's a lot of wow factor here. We're excited about it. Lots of glass. And then on the next one, as you saw, this is the back courtyard area. And Kevin, our landscaper, can tell you a little bit about the actual functions of the courtyard themselves. But we're planning walking paths and a putting green and a bocce ball court for the residents, as well as this hardscape patio that they can sit out on their rocking chairs and anything else. Do you have any questions, I guess, for me?
Sure,
One,
Commissioner Toole.
this obviously answers part of our question about what's happening, how this integrates with the open space across the way with the hotel.
Yes.
When you're talking about the paths and things, you mentioned a pond. Are you talking about the stormwater area?
I'm talking about the Kettle Park Pond, yes.
Okay. Okay.
All right, we'll have opportunity for more questions, but I'll close the meeting and we'll open a public hearing for anyone here wishing to speak. I don't have anyone registered and don't see anyone at this point wishing to speak, so I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Whoops, break my computer on the way. And reopen for the regular course of business. Commissioner Bartlett.
This is from your market research. What kind of, do you expect 100% occupancy, and what kind of radius do they typically come from to seniors? Are they normally, would they be in Stoughton, or is there a typical radius where you attract people from?
The market study is good. We've looked at it hard. We've studied it hard with Tealwood. Our residents will generally come from like a 15-mile radius. It could go as far northwest as the eastern side of McFarland, but not really, not McFarland, Fitchburg, but not really into Fitchburg. You know, it's funny where people come from, but ordinarily, if they lived in the area, they're going to stay in the area because family's here. But sometimes families pull them from and put them in a location where it's close to several family members. So you can never really predict it.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanna and then Troy.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, in regards to residents, you've projected age ranges. Are there different levels of care offered? And then on a secondary question, as far as parking goes, which might be more of a site plan thing, but are you envisioning employees parking in the garage down below, or any residents having vehicles, maybe one vehicle or so? I guess maybe you answer a few of those.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Maybe we can go to the site plan there. There is a mixture of independent and assisted living. The way we structure our financial packages, we offer our residents a base package, like an entry fee to get in to rent one of those apartments. And certainly based on your level of needs, then it's kind of a la carte. It's we study the residents' needs, and staff makes a recommendation of what level of care that they need at that time. But it's certainly a graduated scale as you age in place and need more services. As far as the parking goes, we do have underground parking currently underneath the building. You can see at the bottom left is the entrance drive to the basement. Josh, how many stalls do we have? 27, 28 from memory. The staff will park partially in the rear where you see those stalls over by memory care. We've studied these ratios. Obviously, memory care folks don't need a car. The independents need more of one stall per unit. So based on what our market study says, we think we found the right balance of what we need for underground parking. And then assisted as you get older, you don't need to drive, shouldn't be driving so much anyway. So we're really confident of our parking needs for the facility. Does that answer it?
Yep.
Okay.
Commissioner Truul.
Thank you, Mayor. Tom, to that point, following up, what are the typical size units? Are you really going after in the senior care side, and are you looking at single and double units within that, a husband-wife kind of situation? What's the mix?
Yeah, great question. We consist of studio units that are about 330 square feet each. We then have a handful, Josh, help me out, but one-bedroom units, one bedroom with dens, and then two-bedroom, two-bath. All of these units, with the exception of the studios, are set up, frankly, as full market rate apartments, full kitchens, side-by-side washers and dryers. So let's face it, baby boomers expect a little more. We recognize that. And, folks my age are making decisions for my parents. And we like it nicely appointed for mom and dad. So we go the extra mile on that within the apartments.
Thank
And
you.
if I can follow up just one more then,
Sure.
Tom, in terms of price range, what kind of market are you trying to hit? I guess whatever you can share with us. We get different types of proposals coming before us. I guess I'm just curious as to where this fits.
Yeah, you can't quote me on it. My daughter really heads that up, but I believe our base rent starts at around $2,800 a month for the independent side, and then it grows based on assisted living needs.
Okay.
So generally, 2,000 up to maybe at most 4,000 for ALIL.
Uh-huh.
And then for memory care, we'll be in the 4,800 to start range.
Okay.
So very, very comparable with what else is in the area.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a couple questions regarding the buffer zone between this lot and the hotel. Can you just give us a sense on what you've got there? My understanding is the hotel has some entertainment on that side of the building and I just wanted to see what the buffer consists of.
Kevin, you might have to help me out here from a landscape standpoint, but that was certainly a concern of mine. I've looked at it. I am no longer concerned with, what it looks like. We hope to make arrangements with the hotel to use their pool. Our independent people are still quite independent, and I think that will be welcomed by some of the residents. Kevin?
Rodney, I think there was a rendering.
There's one, yeah.
Concept rendering.
That's what I was looking at.
This one?
Yeah. There you can see the relationship between the hotel's patio and our proposed patio, and what's rendered there is what is pretty close to reflective in the landscape plan. On lot 16, this property, we have a fair number of taller evergreen trees, Colorado blue spruce, Black Hill spruce, and then the buffer yard on the hotel's property is very substantial. I think we had large, taller poplars, and then a Colorado blue spruce spaced almost every 20 feet, so it's a very dense buffer there.
Is there a berm there, or is it flat?
There was not a berm. We are going down into a bioretention pond, that stormwater management area shown kind of in that yellow hue, but no, there isn't a berm.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? And this is regarding our first resolution, which is dealing with the conditional use permit. Commissioner Hanna.
I move for approval for conditional use.
Second.
Motion by Hanna, second by Truul. Further comments or questions? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Now
Thank you.
we'll move along to the site plan review, which is Resolution 17 in your packet. Commissioner Hanna.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. In regards to Phase 2 development plans, I'm just trying to recall where the northwest side of the site meets up with. I don't know if you guys want to speak to that or address it, I guess. And then one other question is the courtyard area, I guess I'll call it courtyard area, by the memory care, their patio area, is that fenced in?
Yes, it really is, and it'll be nicely appointed. You know, it's a great place for reflection, a little bit of walking to go on, but absolutely must be a gated area. As far as the Phase 2, I would really need to lean on Kevin again.
So along that northwest property line, the Phase 2 access drive for that multifamily that's proposed there would be offset, I believe, 5 or 10 feet based on whatever the setback is there. So directly adjacent to that landscape buffer, we would have our access drive.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Truill?
Tom, do you have any questions or concerns about the operations of the hotel? I know you've just talked about the landscaping and what's there. I mean, one of the concerns that council had originally was, again, the open concept and the outdoor garden and things like that. Are you comfortable with that the hotel is going to take care of and with the landscape is going to knock down any noise, so that's not going to be an issue for you?
I really don't think it will be. I know the operator, so I can call him on his cell anytime. Truthfully, no. And we still want some interaction between the two properties. You know, we have the market rate apartments on the west of us that's planned for. We're working on that a little bit with forward development. So I think I got a good feel for it, and it doesn't concern me at all. At one point, I wondered if Walmart was a good complement for our facility, or was that going to be a distraction? And our market folks said, no, this is good. You know, it really puts you on the map. People know you're here. So when we get a little bit further down the road, we want to talk about some signage with forward development, potentially out at 51, just to let the world know we're here, but nothing big, major. We're a found destination, and I think the building is nicely sited, good. Where we have the balcony decks, we're overlooking the Kettle Pond. And then we have our landscape area to the east that, other than first thing in the morning, is out of the sun. Folks don't want to be in the sun too long. When you get a little bit older, they understand skin issues. So, I don't know, I'm really pleased with the layout. Josh did a remarkable job. At first, we didn't have memory care, and then we studied it further, and then realized, yes, there is a need, and Tealwood Senior Living really wants the continuum of care in all of our properties. So independent, assisted, and memory care if you need it.
Commissioner Hanna?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, Ted, I just want to return to the parking quick and just see if you guys had, a plan for, say, holidays in memory care, and you're having families coming around Christmas time or Easter. In your past facilities, I know you've said you've kind of locked in that this is a good amount of parking for this. Is there any sort of plan for overflow if that should happen, or things get taken up and maybe have additional staff on those times when there's more people around?
Yeah, great question. I'd like to think if we get in a parking jam, maybe we can park on Jackson Street. But I will tell you what really happens is for the independent and the assisted side, there's a lot of residents that leave as well. So my father's going on 7 years at Attic Angels on the west side of Madison, and you talk about a complicated, crammed-in site. That's what happens. They're coming and going, and parking's really never been an issue. So I can't say it won't happen, but Bob, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, again, fair comment. We've done studies on this, and we've actually gone to the facilities.
studied traffic flow, looked at staffing counts, looked at how the buildings use, when peaks occur and when they don't occur. We have found that in the past, our buildings have been overparked. So rather than put all that parking space into place, all that extra impervious, must be sensitive to the site. So we feel really confident with this. It's the right amount, and again.
Yeah, I would agree that I like the way that the parking's broken up. You know, it's not just one large lot, so it seems a little bit more intimate. Quick question for Rodney and Michael. As far as parking on Jackson Street, are
Parking
there
on
restrictions?
There will likely be restrictions. There's bike lanes on Jackson Street. But, you know, as you've indicated, they've done their study. It does meet the minimum parking requirements by ordinance. You know, in parking overflow situations, people figure out what works. And, you know, neighboring sites sometimes get hit up. You know, there's areas to the south of this and just nearby that will also develop likely into some commercial uses that might be complementary to visitors as well.
Okay.
Sure, Commissioner
If I
Hanna.
could continue, I think the building looks great. As mentioned, the parking, I think the parking design is nicely laid out. I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. You'll still have an opportunity to speak, though. Commissioner Barman.
My question relates to pedestrian connections, and it would seem, as I look at your site plan, the intent is for the primary pedestrian connections to be along that front parking lot where you got your pathways that connect to the sidewalk system along Jackson Street. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I was wondering if there was ever thought put to pedestrian connections that might connect more directly to the hotel facility, especially if you're talking about sharing pool facilities. I always like to look to see as many pedestrian connections to pathway systems and other uses as possible, so I just want to ask that.
I talked to Bob about this, and we didn't get it on the plan, but I'm with you. The more we can get our seniors out walking when weather is cooperating, all the better. So if the hotel folks are open to that, we look to do that, as well as interconnect the best we can when the apartments get designed to the west. So totally for that.
One other thing. I also would like to compliment you on the building design. I like the way you've broken it up and added the variety of different surface treatments. It's an attractive building. Not knowing Norwegian architecture that well, I was wondering how we kind of set the pitch of the roof, because my first gut reaction would be that it might have been even a little bit steeper, so it almost seems like it's kind of a compromise between traditional and what might have been more Norwegian. But I mean, I like the look of the building.
Well, thank you. I don't take any credit for that, other than giving Josh the nod. These two guys, you want to speak to that?
The steeper is, the more steeper we get, the more Norwegian we get, clearly. So we had to find a middle grade between what's our height requirements, you know, what's the budget. We thought that we went as steep as we possibly could. I think we're at about a 812, don't quote me on that.
Okay.
So we're happy with it. We think it has that appeal. When we get too high, we're going to get above the main ridge of the main building, and then there's more problems. So that's the reason for that.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Engelberger and then Truul.
Thank you, Your Honor. Seeing that there are more Germans than there are Norwegians in Stoughton, it's probably okay. And my name is Engelberger. Rodney, just another question about, I didn't see many exceptions here, is that right? And if you or somebody could just talk about item number 7 a little bit with the impact fees.
Yeah, well, this actually comes into play even more now in the fact that Phase 2 hasn't been solidified. So the parkland requirement still requires the fee in lieu of, because the land hasn't been secured as parkland. So that's why that's where it's at this point.
And the numbers that are listed are?
It's the current rates.
Okay.
So from a timing standpoint, we hope to be in the ground in the summer this year and open in the fall of 18. And while we're woefully aware of that park fee, we're working this through with Forward Development Group, and we're hoping things will get solidified on Phase 2, and this will work itself out. But we realize it's an open-ended item that we really don't have budget for at this point. And I'd sure hate to get rid of those roofs, so it's a trade-off.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Truill.
Thank you, Mayor. And I too would like to commend your design. I think it's great. I also am really impressed with the way you broke the building up on the lot in terms of tying in the memory care in the back. You did raise one question though, Josh. Do you know what the actual peak of the highest point, highest ridge is in terms of height?
Yeah.
My reason for asking is, obviously, we've got a hotel
Yes.
next to it that is multi-story, but as we work to the back side of the hotel, and maybe Dennis might know too, but we've got the conference center on the back side that isn't that. I'm curious as to...
The actual peak height, no, don't quote me on this, but I remember being about 3 feet above the max building height, but that max building height is actually the median roof, which I think is 50 feet. Is that 40? So we're 43 to the ridge of the building.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments or questions? Otherwise, we do have a motion by Hannah, second by Truill, to approve Resolution 17 of 2017 regarding the site plan. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? That motion carries. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Actually, a win. Nice project over there.
And next we have, folks get ready. We have to go ahead and hold the public hearing for this one.
You see it?
Let's see.
Yep.
There's no biggie. Thank you. Agenda item 8 is a request by Forward Development Group to amend the general development plan for Kettle Park West Commercial Center. It's been noticed as a public hearing for this evening, while Kettle Park West folks have asked us to remove this item from consideration tonight. We'll still be here in case there are others that wish to speak this evening. So I will ask if there are those wishing to speak at the public hearing regarding the GDP for Kettle Park West Commercial Center. And I don't see any, so we'll continue on. We'll go ahead and remove agenda item 8 from our agenda this evening and move on to 9, which is a request from Claudia Romero for approval of a shed installation at Head Start, 315 Mant Parkway.
The aerial shown on the screen is the location, has a pointer location indicating where the shed replacement is planned to occur or to take place. This is a site plan for that installation. Sorry, for those of you that don't know where Head Start is, it's on the corner of Mant Parkway and South 4th Street.
Comments or questions regarding the shed proposal? Commissioner Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. For staff, no problems here? You're okay with everything? Everything looks good?
There's no known issues that we're aware of.
Thank you. Commissioner Barman.
Just a clarification, making sure I'm understanding this correctly. We're just evaluating the replacement of the shed? Because I know there's also the Struck and Irwin fence sheet, and I was trying to figure out whether they were making changes to the fence itself. I know there's a lot of I drove by there on my way over here, and there's a lot of rolled.
Yeah, fences are handled administratively, so
Okay,
it's
so
in
we're
here,
just
but it doesn't
evaluating
have to
shed.
be dealt with as part of that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions regarding the Head Start request for this evening?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. what-
Motion to approve.
Thank you. There's a motion by Engelberger, second by Hannah to approve. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? That motion carries. Thank you. I'm sorry, I just moved right along. I better go back to 10. Is a request by the City of Stoughton for approval of parking and pedestrian improvements at Troll Beach 401 Mant Parkway.
This is
On
actually,
down the street from Head Start, right?
yeah, next
Keep on
door.
going.
Next door. This is actually kind of an exciting plan. As you may have recognized, the pavement condition at Troll Beach has been substandard for a while, as well as accessibility issues. So you can see the site plan improves the mainline sidewalk all the way to the facility and from the parking areas, but even into the entrance area that was always a little substandard, if not non-code compliant. It will be brought into compliance to allow for better access, totally new pavement, and curb and gutter to perimeter the site.
Move approval.
Very nice.
Second.
Motion by Truul, second by Engelberger. Comments or discussion? Commissioner Hanna.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Do you know approximately how many bikes that rack will be able to hold with the improvements? I mean, or know how many bikes end up at the park during the summer? If there would maybe be a need for more, or?
They don't let me go to the beach during the day, so I don't know.
We don't know about the bike total, but certainly there's a bike parking requirement.
Pad,
And
yeah.
that's what we're placing there. I think we were planning to accommodate a half a dozen bikes at a minimum there to start with, I believe was the discussion.
Six is required.
6 is required.
So I think there was
Yeah.
maybe 6 or 8 at least.
I guess I would just, maybe ask Mr. Lynch if,
that's adequate.
just a consideration, or, whoever's employees there, if they see overflow bike parking, or if there might be a need.
Thank you.
Yeah. Very nice improvement. Commissioner Bartlett.
I guess, Rodney or Michael, I don't know, curious about the requirements possibly for lighting at night as this area gets more use with improvements that the Parks Department wants for the park.
Yeah.
Is there any requirement for night lighting if we get more people down there, or?
Well, since this facility isn't used at night, it'll have just general lighting. There isn't any specific, but it is being piped to accommodate Center Island lighting in the future to be installed. So we're making provisions for it so that as the park use expands into an evening operation, obviously you wouldn't have to disrupt pavement surfaces.
Thinking the skate park is right next door, and this nice new concrete would be a nice place to use probably, so.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanna.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Essentially, is this just resurfacing what is existing, or is there any changes to the lot layout?
Accommodate the accessible stalls, the footprint is very similar.
Yeah.
Very similar. Very little change to the actual area.
Sure. And then any plan for landscaping of the trees, or?
Actually, some of the trees that are getting transplanted from other locations are likely ending up here. So the Parks Department and their tree removal project are probably going to end up transplanting some of the trees from other locations to this area.
Great, thank you.
Very nice. All right, further comments or questions? All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Agenda item 11 is the comprehensive plan rewrite. And you said it would start at 7. Boy, you're good, Michael.
Wasn't me.
You are good. And we do have a link on our website to where the comprehensive plan is located. An intro, Rodney, before we go to our public hearing?
Well, representatives from Vanderwall are here, so maybe if we'll just have them give a status as where we're at and what we're in process to move forward with tonight, and then have the public comment period after that.
Perfect, thank you.
Just- Hey, Donna?
Yeah.
Just one question.
Sure.
Quick. Just the item number 8, was it, did we refer that to the next meeting, or what were you doing with that item?
It was removed from the agenda. They've withdrawn the application.
So they're withdrawing that agenda item?
Yeah,
For tonight.
they'll be
It'll
back
come
with
back.
something
Okay.
different later.
Okay.
June agenda.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah, the June agenda, part of the packet.
Okay. All right, welcome back.
Hi, it's nice to see you all again. So just to remind you where we are in the comprehensive plan update process.
Could you move your microphone a little bit closer, please? Thank you.
How's that?
Perfect.
So you should all have a copy of our January version of the comprehensive plan, which is our second draft. Following the completion of that draft, we held a public open house in January, at which we received numerous comments from the public about the draft plan. And following that open house, we had a second open house in March, continued to collect comments, and this evening the plan is to discuss those comments, understand what types of changes we might want to make to the comprehensive plan draft, and then agree on those changes, and then from there we can develop the third draft of the plan, which is our public hearing draft, and we can move into the public hearing phase of the process.
I think we should move into the public.
Okay, I think we'll move into our public hearing.
Perfect.
So I'll close the meeting and open the public comment. I guess I got all formal. I don't really have to use the gavel if it's public comment, but it was fun. So are there any public comments this evening? Mr. Springman, yep, come on up.
It wouldn't be a comprehensive plan public hearing without me saying something, I guess, at this point. I worked with Mike to get the red line version for tonight, and I didn't get it quite in time to do the kind of analysis I like to do. So I'm assuming I'll just have 3 minutes, so I'm just going to do big picture stuff, and then maybe there's, I don't know how, I would just ask that if those of us that have spent time doing this kind of work, if we could submit written things later or whatever, because I can't say what I want to say in 3 minutes. I just can't, so.
Your Honor,
You can have
I
a
don't
little
think we
longer
have a
than 3 minutes.
3-minute
We
limit
don't
on
typically.
the Plan Commission here.
Okay, all right.
I was just going there.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
Michael.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll try not to abuse that too much.
We'll cut you off after 30 minutes, Roger.
Oh, thank
You're
you,
outta
all
here.
right, okay. That's my bedtime then anyway, so that
Okay.
works out fine. What I'd like to do is just to kind of cherry pick a few things that I think are pretty important for a SMART plan, smart growth. The basis for what we're doing is going back to an old plan, as we all know, from the early 2000s that was dedicated to the concept of smart growth, smart planning. So the first thing I want to point out is city infill analysis. Again, keeping in mind I just got the red line today of the current version, I tried to make of it what I could, and what I see is a couple of things that are really confusing to someone trying to get their head around city infill analysis and city infill needs. For example, by that I mean that we have a fair bit of, well, not a lot compared to some other cities, but acreage inside Stoughton city limit that actually can and should be developed to a higher use based on zoning and based on current open character. It's open character. So a couple things are missing there to do a good city infill analysis. Number one being the acreage and location of undeveloped lands. It's really hard. I looked at the tables that are in here, and I couldn't find anything dedicated to undeveloped land per se. I know that within all the categories that are mentioned on that one table, there is undeveloped land there, but as a discrete entity, it is not there saying this amount of this area is undeveloped. And so I would encourage the concept of, if we're going to do smart growth, smart planning, let's find out where the undeveloped acreage is with a map perhaps. Again, you have to pardon me, I just didn't have time to do all the map work today that I would like to do. But that would be important, and also its zoning characteristics. What are those areas zoned for relative to their current openness? Because if we're going to follow an infill concept or policy, knowing what's there and what it can be upgraded into for development purposes strikes me as a pretty good idea. And part of that, of course, then means getting our tables accurate and current based on undeveloped land, which I could not detect myself in the documents that I read today. So that would be one area. Another one quickly is population growth analysis. We all know that population drives a lot of land use change for a lot of reasons. But what happened at our March 13th meeting is that comments were made about 20-year, 40-year, and 50-year. And while I recognize that our consultants did some upgrading of that concept, what to me is really important for a citizen, even though I'm maybe more than just the average citizen that cares about these things, is to make it easy to see what would a 20-year look at Stoughton's both city boundary and periphery look like for meeting current and expected growth platforms or rates, for example. We all know that by and large, the citizens of Stoughton appear to want something in the range of 2% or less per year or thereabouts, making it likely that over the course of, let's say, a decade, 1,000 to, say, 1,200 people would be a reasonable number to shoot at for a decade. So where those 1,000 to 1,200 people go is important for the city council to know and for the planning commission to get its head around. So the maps need to reflect that by appropriate boundaries and boundary delineations. And I'm not sure that I could detect that today in the work that I did or looks that I made. So it encouraged the council and planning commission to get their head around boundary areas committed to a 20-year look at estimated future population growth, and the fact that given reasonable thinking, if we're looking at 2 people per household to get to 1,000 to 1,200 people over the course of a decade, we're looking at maybe 500 to at most 600 housing units. So, and when I talked to Vanderwall at the March 13th meeting, I encouraged them to come up with some kind of concept that would make it easy for the council and planning commission and concerned citizens to detect what it takes to get a 500 to 600 houses. Where would they go? Where could they go over the course of a decade? And so that gets to the boundary thing on a map, and also gets to data with regard to where's the undeveloped land, and the ability then of the city to use proper infill policies and techniques to get that done. So it's a lot of words there. I hope that makes some sense. If not, I can try it again later in a memo. The other thing I'll point out is that I'm really concerned about schools, and I know you had a meeting with the school district recently. This report to date doesn't give you enough information to work. Maybe your meeting did on the whatever day it was recently, but as far as what's in here, I think what's missing is the ability to take school attendance areas, that is our elementary school attendance areas, and somehow relate them to the data that's really important for you to analyze. And that would be housing data and population data. That is looking at your 3 elementary school areas and overlaying them on data and information that helps you decide and see where people are moving with kids or where they're not moving with kids. So I would suggest that if there's a way that we could work with Vanderwall's associates to do that, that might be very handy to know from an elementary school standpoint, where are people going, where are they not going. So I think a boundary map overlaid somehow into your other data could be really handy for knowing what's happening to our schools, where are people moving, and some of it's instinctive. You know it already if you've lived in Stoughton long enough, but I'm saying to put it on a map seems to be a pretty good idea to me. And a couple final things, just flipping it over here, my cheat sheet. Another thing that came out, I think, at the March 13th meeting was, and I know that they said they could not afford to do it based on our current allocation of money to them for this project, but it'd really be good to see in this report, and I couldn't find it, using current demographics and current housing data, how many kids are currently associated with a single-family residence? I know there was a verbal answer to that question. I think Alder Swadley mentioned that or asked that question way back in January, but I think somehow using whatever data is out there for knowing how many kids or portions of kids in most cases are associated with a single-family residence, an apartment, or a rental unit gives you a chance to really figure out, because we all know we've got to grow, we've got to have more kids. So knowing how many kids, high school, elementary, middle school, are associated with single-family homes and rental units, I think would be really good data for you to know and get your head around for future planning purposes, for where housing should go or should be encouraged. And finally, one quick thing would be commuter parking. I mentioned this back on March 13th. I would really want to see a suggestion myself where commuter parking should go in Stoughton. We all know that a good abundance of Stoughton residents go north every day, or maybe west then north. So where would a good location be for a commuter parking lot? I think that'd be a real handy thing to kind of throw in here, or at least have a little idea for it. And finally, I'm really concerned about having 2 large parcels, the Gateway Business Park and the Linnerud property, show up as major northern development areas. And my hope would be is that the City Council or the Planning Commission could have a discussion about the feasibility and wisdom of creating 2 mega parcels on the north side of Stoughton going towards McFarland as development areas for the near term. Again, maybe if you relate that to years, 20 years versus 40 years, that makes more sense, but just to show them as open blocks of development land for the future, 2 mega parcels going north out of Stoughton without further discussion doesn't strike me as a particularly good idea without discussion. It made a lot of sense maybe in 2000 because of the Walmart store to open up the Linen Road property to that idea. Now, 15 years later, we're in a different place, so maybe rethinking Linen Road kind of turf and that mega development versus across the street, the Gateway, I think deserves some good council attention and planning commission attention. I've used it a little bit here, I apologize, but I said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others wishing to speak at the public comment period? No? All right, I'm seeing no others this evening. So I'll ask you folks to review the open house comments. Please.
Yep. All right. It's closer again. All right, so as I mentioned, the open houses were both very well attended. We received numerous comment forms and it had very robust discussion at both of those events. In addition, we received numerous emails and letters from people who either attended the open house and wanted to say a little bit more, or people who didn't have the opportunity to attend either of the events. The city also included a comment box at the library, and we received numerous comments through that format as well. So I took the time and reviewed all of those comments. I think a lot of people really put a lot of thought into their comments, thought really strategically about the future of the city, and I think Stoughton's really lucky to have a lot of people who are committed to this process and who are really engaged. From my point of view, it seemed like a lot of people just had a lot of questions about how the plan works, or maybe had trouble finding things within the plan. But to me, the biggest concerns that we heard were there were numerous concerns about the amount of growth shown on our future land use map. People wondering why the city is planning for more than 20 years of growth in this iteration of the comprehensive plan. That's something that we've discussed at the Plan Commission level for a while. The city has historically planned for more growth than we've anticipated in the next 20 years. We're not bound to plan for only the next 20 years. The city can plan for as much as it wants within its extraterritorial jurisdiction. And, lots of other cities do it as well. Other comments that we heard was need for more emphasis on redevelopment and infill. And I think this plan really stresses a balanced approach between infill and redevelopment and greenfield development. And you'll see in the plan document that there are long sections about future land use patterns, both within the developed part of the city and at the edges of the city. We heard numerous comments about need for more emphasis on bicycle and pedestrian planning, alternative modes of transportation. There is a substantial section of the comprehensive plan that discusses regional transit opportunities, bike planning recommendations, pedestrian recommendations. And as this plan has been developed, the city, as you all know, updated its bicycle plan. And so with that step in hand, I think the city's well on its way to support bicycle transportation. We also heard several comments related to commuter assistance, so regional transit opportunities or park and rides. And I think that is pretty well covered in the existing plan document. We talked about it as a staff level, and there's not that much the city can do on its own with regional transit. Surely if if a regional transit initiative started to develop, I think Stoughton is in a good position to get on board with that initiative. I think Stoughton would be supportive of that initiative, and the plan doesn't get in the way of that. And so I think the plan acknowledges that Stoughton would be supportive of regional transit should it become something that happens, a valid initiative. So after reviewing the comments, I took the time to develop a list of changes that I think that should be made to the plan based on what we heard at the open house. And I've provided those in a memo that you should all have in your packets. So if you don't mind, I'll just go through those briefly. And if anyone has any questions about them, we're happy to answer those. So the first one's pretty simple. In Table 6, we have summary of existing land uses in the city and number of acres by land use category. And that table was a little bit confusing because it mixed up what subtotals were and what totals were. And so we just fixed that table so it's easier to understand. Second item was to include the latest population estimate for the city of Stoughton. So that 2015 estimate was 12,976 people. So that gives you about a 2% growth rate since 2010 for the last 5 years. The third recommended change was to remove a policy on page 134 of the plan that states that public money would be used to prepare land for residential growth. I think this policy gives the impression that the city would lay roads and sewer ahead of development, which isn't a current policy of the city, so we thought it'd be best to just take that out. The fourth suggestion was just to clarify the planning period of the plan. I think that the draft plan didn't do a good job of explaining that the plan is a 20-year plan, but the future land use map plans for more than 20 years of development. And so we added a paragraph to explain that generally most of the recommendations in the plan are for the 20-year timeline, but knowing that the future land use map is really a vision of where the city could be over the next 20 plus years. And so to clarify that in the text so that people aren't confused about that. On page 124 of the plan, we wanted to clarify the language that we use to describe the need for future schools in the city. So on the second page of your memo, we've included an excerpt of that text in the plan. In that section, we suggested, based on growth over the planning period, there might be a need for additional elementary schools and middle schools. And so we just recommended taking that language out since it's really, I think the school district will just have to watch closely where enrollment trends take them and whether new school sites are needed. And so I think this language just distracted people about the rate and pace of growth that Stoughton was anticipating. The next change that I'm suggesting is to note some of the accomplishments that the city achieved since the last plan update. A few people at the open house were concerned about certain recommendations in the last plan that didn't appear in the current draft plan. And the reason for that was the fact that the city accomplished them. And nowhere in the plan did we note those accomplishments that I think the city should be proud of. So we proposed adding a little bit of text about the zoning code rewrite, the rail corridor neighborhood plan, and a few other accomplishments since the last plan update. We also heard numerous comments about concerns about the number of acres depicted on the future land use map, especially compared to the land use projections that exist in Chapter 3 of the plan document. So in Chapter 3 of the plan, we use our population projections to estimate how many acres of land the city will need in the next 20 years. That's 1,997 acres, so about 2,000 acres are projected to be needed in the next 20 years. On the map, we have about 3,500 acres mapped, so clearly there's more acres mapped than we've projected that we'll need in the next 20 years. But again, that's consistent with what I've been saying about more acres being mapped that we'll need during the planning period. So it's about 1,500 more acres than we're expecting to need. So I recommend that we just spell that out clearly in the plan so that people understand the difference between those two numbers.
And Jackie, is that bad, or does that just give options for where that growth might take place?
Yes, I think it, as you said, it gives options. It allows the city to respond to market inefficiencies, maybe fluctuations in the market, unpredictability about what land can be developed and when it can be developed. And so, mapping the amount of land that is shown on the map doesn't compel growth to happen in any given place. It just gives the city the possibility to act and to respond to proposed growth in those locations.
Thank you.
The last change that I suggested is kind of related to that point. I think there are a lot of concerns about the prioritization of land development and the phasing of land development. I think when some people look at this map, they see a lot of growth, and to them they might think that that's sprawl. And so I suggest that we add a text box to the plan that emphasizes how land does get developed and what steps take before the land on the edge of the city would get developed. So something along the lines of emphasizing that, this plan is implemented through individual decisions. So that includes annexation decisions that are typically driven by the property owner, zoning decisions, enforcement by the city. Proposed development will have to meet city's existing rules. Plan commission reviews all proposed development. Typically, if large parcels are interested in being annexed into the city will do a small area plan or a neighborhood plan. City will continue to follow its land use policies in Chapter 3, so develop will need to be contiguous to existing transportation routes, existing services and utilities. So all this smart growth language and smart growth policies that are included in the plan will be applied to new development. And so understanding that, seeing large areas shown for growth doesn't mean that's all going to happen overnight, and it's going to be contrary to the goals of the city. Does anyone have any questions so far?
Thank you. Commissioner Truill.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jackie, I think that's probably the things I've heard the most in terms of talking to folks. Really focus on those last couple of items. Again, the actual acreage that is shown and then the prioritization or phasing. And I guess a couple things I would like to see us do. I know when we were kind of mapping large chunks, part of that is some of those spots are undevelopable. And I think that needs to be called out or somehow differentiated from a color standpoint, because we looked at, blocks on the east side, the block I see up there, might represent hundreds of acres. And in reality, some part of that is not developable at all, and I think that needs to be taken out. But secondly, I heard a lot of folks saying things similar to what Roger had mentioned about kind of prioritization or phase 1, phase 2. And I think the key is, if this is going to be something that's going to be revisited every 10 years, but we're looking at a 20-year span, and we're talking about a 40-year and things, that perhaps somehow or another, we need to create some banding around here that says this is the priority. And I'm not sure exactly how to do that, other than to say, again, when I look at the east and the west side, to start saying, okay, from a practical standpoint, contiguous to transportation and developable land and things, this is, perhaps on that map, again, just throwing a dart at it, but picking on the east side block up there, that from a practical standpoint, the priority for development, we would prefer to see it to the west of Spring Road. Again, there's a natural boundary, there's a road, there's something that says something. It doesn't preclude us from jumping across that, but at least it sends the right message that we aren't necessarily looking for the first developments to happen at the outer edges. And I think that's probably one of the greatest comments that I can't speak for other folks, but I know when I've tried to talk to people and ask them about it, they're basically say, it seems like we're planning for way too much land, and we're not necessarily prioritizing where we want to see it as a part of that. And so if there's a way for us to again, I guess, fundamentally clean up the map and identify stuff that simply is not developable, and if we back some of those things out, my guess is some of the numbers might look a little better. But then perhaps second, we look at, priority phase and a secondary phase or something from that standpoint.
I'd like to just add something related to the mapping to the limits that are shown here. You see a number of ETJ requests. If an ETJ request comes up in the areas that are mapped here, you're going to scrutinize it much differently than if it was in a retracted area. So this also heightens your awareness on how you're reviewing those requests. We wouldn't want to see, for example, an inconsistent development occur within that boundary. This gives us another tool to say, that's not within their vision to allow that to occur, say on the west side or east side of Spring Road, for example. So I see it as a tool for that. I think the contiguity to existing development goes without saying. Efficient delivery of services has to occur. So to anticipate growth to occur on the far east corner of Spring Road is highly unlikely until a number of things have to happen. I'm of the mind that we have a 1.5 mile ETJ area. This is far short of extending a development plan out that far. Even with our community being over 10,000, we could change into a third-class city. A couple other things understood, we'd have a 3-mile ETJ area. So while I fully respect and anticipate infill development, I think we've all seen and will anticipate the the challenges that go in along with infill, and not only focusing on infill. There has to be, in my mind, an opportunity to recognize that there will be some greenfield development. This just helps us frame future requests as they come forward. The ones that I think are most important for us to scrutinize more are the ETJ ones that come in within this mapped area. So this gives us another tool to help us be critical of those.
And from my standpoint, Rodney, I guess, again, one thing to have it on the map and be showing people, my belief is that this is that guide, and if someone is looking to come in and take a look at where they should develop or what might be available in town, I think that this should be the first place they should look. And
Right.
and from our standpoint, a recognition that someone is going to be pragmatic, hopefully, as they're doing that, but to, again, just kind of reemphasize. And I'm echoing comments I've heard from dozens and dozens of people that I've been trying to talk to, and I've been fortunate enough to attend a lot of the meetings and grab people who walked out. I don't disagree with the plan in terms of saying, hey, this is where we may be in a number of years. I think that the challenge is back to just the communication to our citizenry and also to the outside world that's saying, hey, look, here's our map and here's what we're up to.
Right.
But from a practical standpoint, emphasis is going to be placed in certain areas that we'd like to see happen first. And I think it's just a pragmatic kind of discussion here. I think the concern has been, as we've drawn the map and as we started adding up the acreage, it sends the wrong message for a lot of the folks in the community. And so it's a matter of trying to figure out how we can represent that. Again, it's a growing document. It's a stake out a bit of our territory kind of document, but at the same time, it's difficult for a lot of folks to take a look at this plan and understand where that all plays. And so all I'm suggesting is that, and maybe it's a combination of enhancing the narrative, as Jackie was mentioning, but also perhaps, identifying certain areas as phase 2 type developments that clearly, again, as a colorblind guy talking about colors, but perhaps it's a case where there's a different color that says this is planned or this is anticipated in the 25 to 50 year range or 20 to 40 year range, as opposed to simply treating all of it the same right now. Because again, anybody picking up this map, I think has that, it could legitimately have that assumption.
I would like to just add to that. If you're going to create a map that shows where your 10 or 20-year phasing may or may not be, that may or may not be regulatory anyhow. And if let's say we really have an emphasis on the east side, and we've talked about it for 20 years about trying to hope that would happen. So let's say we really tried to show a peripheral map that gave the next 10-year primary expansion area to the east. And that really wasn't happening, but you had market pressures in other locations, south or other. I'm wondering what value there is in that mapped tool, that tool that shows, while we had hoped for a 10-year growth emphasis on the east side, but either the land didn't become available or wasn't, on the market for that development. I'm just wondering about the value of that plan, unless there's incentives to try to make that really happen. It's a document that shows what our hope is, but it might not be regulatory in allowing us to approve or not approve other developments. That's what I'm concerned about. Drawing that too narrowly, if it is regulatory, to prevent us from maybe considering something south, north, east, or west that might not be in that, say, first buffer zone.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I was going to highlight, when you were talking about expansion areas a number of meetings ago, I think this northwest corner was the area also highlighted earlier. Part of your discussion on the floor was, well, we recognize this area outside of this is undevelopable. Essentially, it's lands that aren't developed. So then when you're looking at the map, previously our map kind of went to about here. The discussion was looking at transportation corridors. And one of the transportation corridors that was focused on or discussed was the next road over, Star School Road. And if we look at that as maybe a major north-south corridor in the future, does it make sense to recognize that development on both sides of that is fairly logical? And that's, I think, where the commission landed on that. Similar to this Rutland-Duntown Line Road, knowing that all of this area is undevelopable, I think the discussion really took us to say those are logical areas to anticipate for future growth. Notwithstanding even a resident or an old property owner had requested consideration of that specific, or at least one of those larger parcels there.
Well, and to the gateway, Commissioner Hanna and I basically were part of the reasons we took it all the way up to that point, because we said from a practical standpoint, if you're going to get a property owner, if we're talking about a farm that's going to come in, it's going to logically probably include that whole area, as opposed to starting to draw lines through the middle of people's properties. And so, you know, I think that was probably how we kind of logically grew, and then also kind of talked about, okay, what's left in that area north of the bank out there at Highway B. That's why that other color showed up at that point. Because again, it's more from a practical discussion about how that's going to happen.
Yeah,
Right, exactly. Commissioner Hanna and then Engelberger.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'd have to agree completely with Rodney's mindset. I don't see any harm in future planning, and honestly, I think at some point we need to trust our city staff and our city commissions to make those right decisions. You know, that's why we have them, and I like the language that you guys added, because I think it clarifies that for our citizens, that this is the process that is followed. But I don't want to sell ourselves short either of future planning. And let's say, you know, we say this is a 2030 line and a 2040 line, and trends are pushing past that, like Rodney said, and say, well, now what do we do? And I remember bringing up in one of the very first meetings about the ability to maybe relook at ETJs a little bit better, that we get them here and we're kind of like, well, you know, what does the county say? What does everybody else say? Okay, fine. But now I think we have something very clear to reference to, very fresh to look at. Also, in terms of the comment we heard about 2% growth, I mean, I respect the opinion, but I guess I don't quite see that as an overlying opinion that all of a sudden we need to scale back. So I think we keep what we have. I think the language is good and solid with the clarification, but I worry about selling ourselves short. I mean, I don't see a problem with planning down the road. And having, you know, being prepared. And I think when we looked at it, everything was logical. And I think a lot of the comments here are just for clarification's sake. And a lot of the answers are already on the maps. But it's a lot of just cleaning things up so, you know, citizens can comprehend it. And I think there's a point, also budget-wise in this process, that we need to trust city staff and city commissions to understand that it's there. And I like the language that was added. From a real detail site-specific point, and then also to toss out an idea that Roger brought up about, say, a park and ride and commuter, but we did add an institutional zoning across the way from Walmart for the substation. So that puts institutional there. Now, I don't understand the process of who manages park and rides and commuter facilities, or if we would want one nearby a substation. But it seems like a very logical intersection to have one. So I don't know if we want to, I mean, we're not getting site-specific on a comprehensive plan, but maybe just look at that site and update it, just so that there's institutional there.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing when you talked about it. That's a perfect spot.
Yeah.
Commissioner Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. I pretty much agree with Alder Truel's statements about where we have things mapped right now and the amount of undevelopable space that's within those boundaries. I mean, if you just look at the green slanted lines, Rodney can kind of point them out a little bit there, kind of next to Spring Road, and there's a whole lot of area. I mean, that whole area right there around Spring Road, I would say half of that yellow area is not even developable. Similarly, in some other areas, north of or west of Kettle Park, even there's some large areas over in there. So I understand people when they think we're trying to grab land out there, but if you look another 20 years down the road, where things are going to go from here, you can't really go north of Scotland and east of B, or east of N, I'm sorry. Almost all of that is undevelopable up there, right up there. Same with along the river on both sides, north of town. I'm looking at number 6 map, Rodney, the one that shows a little bit more of that. You can see that up there. And even, I mean, you look over on north of our entry into the city on 51, or actually kind of south of 51 that goes up at an angle up there when it goes up towards the west. Almost all of that is undevelopable. On our southwest corner, there's a whole lot of undevelopable land outside of our boundaries. And straight south of our, along N, almost all of that between N and A, south of town, is almost all undevelopable. These are all wetland areas. Besides that, we've got areas such as just south of town on Taylor Lane, that whole large development there. I mean, what do we do there at some point? Do we just wrap around that thing and they stay in the township? I mean, those are problems down the road, but and the same with north of town, across B, on the west side of the river, another large developable area there, or developed area that's in the township. We don't have a lot of room to go farther than what we already are. So I think backing off would kind of be a problem. And I really don't think it's a real problem. I understand people's concerns about it, but like I say, there's a lot of undevelopable land within those areas, and these are guidelines. So these aren't actually, this is where we're going to be. I mean, these are guidelines. So that's basically all I wanted to say on that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michael. Further comments or questions regarding the comments and questions? Okay, certainly.
When the state law was passed in 1999, for about 4 years, it included a requirement to show 5-year growth boundaries within the plan. That predated your current draft of the plan. That was removed by the state because it had proven itself unworkable. And depicting those boundaries and then not following them was creating false expectations for people. For a community like ours, where we can grow in many directions, but as Mike said, we're boxed in for at least a third of the periphery. We could depict increments, but I think that the statewide experience has been that they're not followed more often than they are. I will point out that the map currently does imply a phasing, and that's where the urban service area boundary is on the map, and that is the dashed pink line. And I think you can see it best on the south side of the city, or here going through the north side business park. It's that line almost at the top of the screen in the middle. So that's a planning boundary. To expand beyond that line, we have to go to the Regional Plan Commission and get permission to add land within that boundary and move that boundary out. I think CARPC sees 25 of those amendments every year around the county. So it's a line. It requires half a year's worth of work to move it. There are expenses and a wait. But CARBC changes those lines many, several times a month on an average month. And I think it's the one line that we have on the map that's a phasing line that actually does create some hurdles. And I'm wondering, even if on the face of this map, we could list those steps that Jackie identified in her memo, just talking about the ingredients that need to be present for development to happen. I think the folks on the commission, and certainly we and your staff, have a good bit of experience with development, but it's a pretty mysterious process to many people. I think that half the people in the county think that cities create development, or cities decide where land will be annexed, and we know that we don't have control over a lot of that first step kind of things. But I do think we could refer to the current urban service area boundary and maybe have that list of ingredients. The other thing that we could do very easily is we could color those crosshatch areas a dark green. The reason that we don't, it's a subtle reason, those are approximate boundaries. We're mapping the DNR and FEMA wetland and floodplain layers before field delineation has taken place. And we've always felt that this cross-hatching kind of implies that these are draft boundaries that are subject to getting staked in the field or subject to FEMA doing new mapping. And actually the boundaries have changed more often because of that than because of things that the city does. But by doing that, we found that people take that to mean parkland or permanent open space, but in fact a lot of it is farmed. A lot of it, most of it, will never become permanently protected open space in the sense that it is parkland, whether county or state or city. Would your preference be that we show those areas as a solid green, or to keep that cross-hatching the way it is?
I was just say, for the cross-hatching, I think is fine if it was just explained maybe a little bit better on the legend to the side. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, Michael, you had something to say as well.
I was just going to say, I think you just keep it the way it is. I mean, I can understand it. I mean, and you explain that it's not a necessary absolute boundary because it's not mapped out. I mean, it's just a guideline type of a...
Right, we have that long footnote. We could say after environmental corridors in parentheses, subject to field confirmation or something to that effect.
Commissioner Truill.
Yeah, and I think, again, like I said, what I was relaying primarily is a lot of the conversations I have with a lot of different people about trying to look at the plans, trying to understand it. And I think, if we did nothing else, again, to the comment that we've mapped, 3,500 acres, and again, okay, what percentage, even if it's a whatever, if we think there's hundreds or whatever that aren't developable, because that's it's a little like explaining, and forgive me, it's like explaining TIF. Folks have an opinion about either that TIF means the city's giving away money, and there's nothing to it, or they understand the process by which TIF is created and comes back. That's the kind of discussion I've had with a lot of different people saying, wait a minute, you're drawing these maps, miles and acres and acres and acres, and so again, you start to go through that and say, well, part of that is pragmatically some of this acreage isn't available, and so maybe it's just, again, an additional notation that says approximately or something. But when we start doing this, the kind of totals you're coming up with, to be able to say, hey, look, to get 2,500 acres around Madison, around Stoughton, with what's up, we had to, logically, here's where we're going, or whatever, or what percentage of that 3,500 acres that we are actually mapping, is developable, is likely developable. Again, like I said, I'm kidding about the different colors or different things. It makes a complicated map already more complicated. So whatever makes the most sense, but the message is where I'm really going after here, and that's that I had a number of people that have been involved in some of either the public hearings or read the newspaper or gone out and heard other things saying, why are you mapping? Why are we making the city as big as we're talking about?
We could definitely do that measurement. We could work with your staff to put together a solid paragraph that talks about the sequencing of development, and in a community that can grow in every direction, the reason that many acres are shown for long-range development, and really the city's choice to focus on long-range growth mapping rather than trying to only map the first 10 years, and we know we'll be wrong about a lot of that.
Thank you. Commissioner Hanna.
If you have more, Mike, go ahead.
Well, would you like us to give that kind of a paragraph a shot, and we could include it as a draft as part of the public hearing draft, and you could then vote on whether to put it in the plan or keep it out, or
I would say yes.
Tweak it.
You want what? Just make sure we clear. He's wanting to create this paragraph, and do we want it in the public hearing draft, or do we want it to be separate from the public hearing draft to be considered to be placed into the? Is that what the options were, Mike? You're trying to.
I would put it in there, and then if we want to take it out, we take it out.
Yeah, I like that.
And we could provide it separately for you all and the council and the public to see as an addendum that, we're adding here at the end of the draft planning process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hanna.
Yeah, thanks. Just another detailed question about a site. What road does the eastern boundary run along? Is that
Pleasant Hill?
Pleasant Hill. My question would be on just north of 51 there. You see, that parcel is yellow. I'm wondering why we don't continue the purple there. I would think it'd make more sense to have the purple planned mixed use adjacent to 51 and not the neighborhood. Just continue it on. It kind of seems to just hang out there, just drag down. Does that make sense?
Certainly could do that.
Understanding that the planned mixed use has some residential option in there.
Thank you. Further comments or thoughts?
So what is the process coming up now?
I'll let them explain it, but it's really moving to the next stage.
So if you're comfortable with the changes that we've discussed today, we'll make those changes and produce a public hearing draft. And then the plan is to have a joint Plan Commission, City Council public hearing. State statutes require 30-day public notice. So notice before the public, 30-day notice before the public hearing. So I'm anticipating that we could do our joint public hearing on June 27th or thereabouts, and I will confirm that with your staff. And at that meeting is when the Plan Commission would be present to hear the public hearing and then move to formally recommend the comprehensive plan by resolution, and the City Council would then move to adopt the comprehensive plan by ordinance. So this is the moment to make substantive changes to the plan before we go into public hearing stage.
It looks like we've covered most of the items at this point. Yep. Thank you, Jackie.
got a comment, question.
Michael Engelberger.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I would recommend we implement the changes as listed here, recommended changes based on public comments. I'm going to ask you guys, is this like the basis of almost all of the comments, or were there some other comments that were out there that we're not really considering here?
Well, I certainly
Because I haven't
didn't-
seen all the comments.
Sure.
I mean, you told us what they are, but
Mhm.
I haven't seen any summarization or anything like that of the comments, but.
Could we make those available?
Well, I think they are. I think
Mhm.
they're on the website, actually.
Okay.
But I should just ask, how do you manage comments like the public ones that were received tonight? So you've heard them all. Is there anything explicit that you think should be dealt with from comments like those tonight?
Sure, Michael.
I think we could provide a list of the significant infill development locations that are shown on the future land use map. I don't think it was implied that we list every single-family lot that is unbuilt, but rather the large unplatted areas available within the city limits. I thought that was a really excellent suggestion, and we could describe them in enough detail so people could find them on the map.
Thank you.
I guess one other question I would ask Mayor Olson, if you would just ask maybe for some public input from people that are at this meeting that have heard the discussion, and just see if they would have any comments at this point.
Additional comments
Yeah.
from what we've already
Yeah.
been talking about tonight?
And
Well,
then we can get at least a little bit of feedback from what we've been talking about here tonight, and, take it from
before we
there.
move forward. Further comments from our folks in the audience tonight? Unfortunately, we don't have phone a friend, so it'd be hard to get those from outside. If you'd come on up and just introduce yourself and.
Hi, I'm John Hallinan. I was one of the people that suggested that the whole area be reduced substantially from what it has been, that everybody seems to think is a horrible idea. But if having a 10-year plan is fraught with peril, why is a 50-year plan any better? It would seem to be 5 times worse in terms of problems showing up. I think that you need to cut it down to no more than 20 years, and to have all this excessive area confuses people. These maps are supposed to be a communication tool, and right now they're not communicating well with the people. Yes, you do. I think you really should separate out those areas that can't be developed because of their wetlands, and somehow differentiate them better than what they are right now. But you're not communicating well with the maps you have, and it doesn't well describe the plan that you have. So I really think you need to cut down the areas that you show on your maps.
Thank you, John. And I did see another hand, if you'd like to come on up to the podium. Nope, you're good. All right, thank you. Thank you for speaking up. All right, right now I have a motion by Alderperson Engelberger. There's not been a second yet.
Second.
Second by Truel. To proceed with a public hearing, a joint plan commission and council public hearing.
With the changes
With
that
these
were.
The changes as
recommendations.
identified this evening. Right, right.
And just a point of,
Sure.
Jackie, you said the 27th of June. That's not a council meeting. It's a Tuesday evening. So was it your intent to hit a council meeting or?
I think it was, yes.
That is a council
Is it?
meeting, I think.
Is that the 4th?
Yeah, I think it's the 4th Tuesday, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
27.
I apologize. I've got listed as the 20th as a council
Always
meeting.
good
but-
to
Okay.
No problem.
All right. That would be what we're aiming at anyway.
Just wanted to make sure we were doing that, not picking another
Yes,
meeting.
thank you.
Great.
All right, a motion by Engelberger, second by Truel. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? That motion carries. Thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing that draft, final draft, I'm saying it backwards, the final draft. Future agenda items. believe that there may be a GDP coming back from.
Yeah, Kettle Park West might have a GDP amendment request for a lot 4 or 7. We'll just see how that materializes and if and when that comes.
Okay. Anything else on the horizon right now? Aldi's, will they be back? Do they need to come back?
Aldi's doesn't need to come back.
They need to come
We
back. They
think that
just
they'll
need to
be.
build.
We think they'll be
All right.
getting started soon.
Okay. All right.
What was the status of the Aldi's and the lights at Jackson Street? I missed that in the development.
Aldi's, the lights weren't dependent upon Aldi's. Quick Trip needed to break ground. They've broken ground now, so the DOT is just finalizing the approval to get moving. There's just a couple little small things. It's been approved, but they got to issue the work and right-of-way permit, so it'll get taken care of.
All right.
I got a
Alderperson
question,
Roberta.
if I could, regarding that intersection. Is it, what's there right now, is that per plan? Is that per what we voted on as a plan?
I don't know what you mean.
Well, for instance, when I take a look there, when I drive by, I mean, are we only going to put lights in? That's going to be it? That'll be the intersection?
At
There's
Jackson Street?
no other construction going to go on for that intersection?
That's correct.
Okay, because I mean, I don't recall, I'd have to go back and look, but to me, it just seems unbelievable that it's a 2-lane road right there, and there's not even a right turn lane coming in from the north. Isn't that accurate?
There's
Jackson
2 through
Street,
lanes.
Jackson and 150 and
Yeah.
51.
Yep.
Coming from the north.
From the
My
north,
understanding is it's a 2-lane road right there,
believe so.
both ways.
Yep.
And there's no turn lane even going into KPW. Now,
I don't think there is a dedicated turn lane. I don't think there
mean,
is. Correct.
How can you have a 2-lane road and not have a turn lane into a development like this? It's just unbelievable to me.
I can't speak to the specifics. The traffic analysis was completed. The DOT is the one that was comfortable with the plans. They had to issue the permit for it.
Is that what we approved, though? I mean,
DOT did. They're the ones that had approval authority of the intersection.
it just, to me, it's just unbelievable that that's the case.
Well, let's wait to see what gets put installed, so you'll see how it functions.
How much jurisdiction do we even have over that?
Very little.
nicely.
They're the ones that have to issue the permit for all the work in that right of way, including the signalization.
All right, further comments? Otherwise, one agenda item is left.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
That was a very quiet motion to adjourn by Hannah, second by Truul. All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.